Hello, and welcome to the Vlogging Pod. Tonight, we are joined by Ariel Dawn. Welcome to the room, Ariel. How are you this evening?
I'm great. How are you?
I am not doing too bad. It would be better if it were warmer, but after
I
the
hear
last warm up and all the tornado warnings, I'll wait.
you.
So, I want to start right off because, and if most of you can read from the bio on the podcast, Ariel, you are a US Today best-selling author. Can you tell
Yeah.
me how that actually came about?
So a couple of years ago, I've been writing for about 4 years. So a couple of years ago, I was involved in a anthology called Midnight Magic. And it was a wonderful anthology. And at the time, the USA Today bestseller list was still very much open to pretty much anyone. I know it's changed a little bit in the last year. But at the time, it was kind of like this big thing for anthologies to make these list runs. And I just happened to be in Midnight Magic. We had a phenomenal amount of authors that all worked our butts off, and we hit the list. And because of that, I get to say that I am a USA Today best-selling author. And fun fact, I found that out while I was cleaning bathrooms at my day job.
Well, it kind of makes you feel like, yeah, cleaning toilets is worth it.
Yeah, yeah, like, all right.
Yeah. I'm counting down the days that I don't have to clean toilets anymore.
Yes, and I don't have to do that anymore, thank God.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Now, how long ago was that?
I want to say about 2 years ago. So
Two
we're in
years.
2024 now,
Okay.
and I can't believe we're in 2024. I feel like I blinked and like 4 years just went whoop.
Oh, I know. I know. It's surprising me how fast thing has went as well, because I'm just like, I look at the time and I'm thinking, wow, where did it
Mhm.
go? Especially, I'm probably like a lot older than you are, so it's like, yeah, when did this crap happen? So, now I don't know if you've noticed, but if you can see, the title of the room is Wrong Turn Romance. I just love your Instagram.
Thank
The
you.
title. That's
Thank you.
fantastic. Where did that come from?
So, way before I ever started writing, I've always been a reader, and I started my bookstagram, Wrong Turn Romance, well before I started writing books, because I kind of fell into this weird little niche where I was trying to make money by doing something that
Mhm.
wasn't writing because I didn't know that I was supposed to write books yet. So I
Right.
actually worked as a book reviewer for a little while for online book club, and I arc read and did things like that. And so at the time, I wasn't necessarily like fully on into like indie romance yet. I wasn't really reading a ton of romance yet, and I was like this opposing audience, right? I was the person who was like, "Oh my god, do they really talk like this? Oh my god." Like and putting all these crazy covers with these crazy tropes on my bookstagram, because I recognized that there was an audience for it, even though at the time I didn't consider myself that audience, which is why you should never say never.
So, how do you see yourself as being different now on the other side of it, as far as reviewing now you're writing it? How do you feel that's different for you now in perspective?
So I feel like being as I have that perspective of being a reviewer and being the fresh face to romance because it wasn't necessarily my genre that I read, even though I always loved books that had romance in them. I feel like that gives me an interesting perspective, both as a writer and as a reader. So oftentimes when I am writing, and now that I understand more about tropes and more about different plot structures and the different kinks and all the little details that go into writing a book, I always keep it in the back of my mind that yes, I'm writing books for an audience that wants to devour them, but how do I hit the person who was me, who might just pick that book up and be like, I really enjoy this. And it leads them to, discover more indie authors or a genre or something that they haven't experienced yet. So I do think in the back of my mind, I always kind of keep that there. And I do still try to write to the reader who is not necessarily in my audience. I try to write to past me.
So, do you think that because you were a reviewer, do you think at that time you were harsher on writers now that you are a writer, or do you think it's reverse?
I think I definitely was harsher back then because I didn't have the understanding that I do now, even as a reader. Because at the time
Mm.
when I was reviewing for the different outlets and I started Wrong Turn Romance, I was more of a young adult reader. I read a lot of young adult, specifically like I was very into like Twilight and like Matched by Ali Condi and Neil Shusterman. Like, so I was reading a lot of more like fantasy, paranormal, young adult, and I'd read some more adult romances, but nothing that was. It was more like the traditional published like romances, like 50 Shades of Grey or something like that.
Mhm.
So I do think I was a little bit harsher then because I didn't necessarily understand the scope of this genre and all the tropes that it entails and the formulas of romance writing. And but because of that, I ended up discovering more indie authors that way, and I became more familiarized with it as a reader. And then eventually, life just took a curveball and I started writing a short story to prove to myself that I could do it. And here I am 50 some titles later. So writing romance.
If you if you could tell your something in advance, as far as being a writer to a reviewer, is there anything now that you would tell your past self
You
on
will
what
get
to do?
there. Be
Oh, you will.
patient. You will get there. Be patient.
Awesome. I just find that interesting because it's very interesting to be on both sides of it. You know what I mean? That you were once this and now you're this. And so just to kind of know what it is, you know what I mean, from one point to the
Hmm.
next to see the perspective on how that changes. Now, let's talk about Hell Everlasting. Now, this is book
Sure.
2, am I correct? In the Lost
Yes.
Soul series?
Yes.
Okay,
That is
talk to
correct.
me about how this book. Now, I think this came out in January. Am I
It
wrong or
did.
right?
You are
Okay.
correct. It came out in January.
Awesome.
January 4th, I believe, is when it came out. It is the second book in my Lost Soul series. Um, which is kind of funny because I have been working on the Lost Soul series for a little bit of time. And previously, readers have likened it to Has Been Hotel and Hell of a Boss, and I have had never seen either of those. So I thought that was a very interesting comparison, and recently I have seen Has Been Hotel, and I am absolutely obsessed. So, and the comparison is good. But
That
it
was
is
awesome.
but it is a series that is about an angel and a demon who end up having to work together to help a lost soul find her body and live. And of course, heaven and hell want her soul for themselves. So there is a little bit of enemies to lovers in there. There's a little bit of found family. And it's a very interesting series for me in terms of like my other series. The romance is probably not as prominent, at least in the first book. But with Hell Everlasting, things do start to heat up. And there is one more book that is coming in the series, and I am currently working on it now. So I'm working on the last book.
Nice. Now, that kind of it sets a stage for me a little bit because we share a similar sort of storyline. Not totally. I do
Yeah.
have angels in hell in one book, a demon and an angel, and but mine is called Catastrophe, so it's a little bit different. But that was like, oh my gosh.
Endor
So
and
that's really
Valerie are very interesting characters because I really like to try to play with that idea of like what is good, what is evil type thing. So you have
yes.
Endor who exudes like these, he's very like noble for being a demon, but he's also kind of brash. And you have Valerie who is, she died a virgin, like, very pious, religious person, and her journey involves like her in a sense falling and like experiencing the world that she didn't get to experience while she was alive. So it's a very interesting series for me.
Oh, it sounds like it. I really well, as you already know, I enjoy that perspective since I've already got a I've got something nothing totally different storyline, but you know what I
Yeah.
mean. But I do like
Yeah.
that premise. So now speaking of your books, I found this very interesting. I was looking through the feeds,
Hmm.
and February 8th, we got Whisper in the Woods back on Amazon. Tell me about how that feels to have it back up for your readers.
Oh my god, I was having a conniption because this Monsters of Ashwood is my best-selling series. It is the darkest of my series. It does come with a list of trigger warnings. But it is a duet, and it is a tale of surviving abuse and trauma and all those things. So when it came down and was blocked after I had updated some formatting, I with a myriad of other authors who went through this, I was like devastated. And it was the paperback that was down. Thankfully, the ebook was okay, but I was, emailing Amazon worried that this book was not going to be available, and to hear that I had readers and friends and family and supporters that like called in on my behalf and said like, "Are you crazy? This book does not need banned."
Oh.
Was extremely humbling, and I'm extremely thankful. And because of all that fuss, it got reinstated. And yeah, that was like I was on cloud nine. I was like, "Oh my god!"
I would have had a panic about that. Heck, for some reason, I was on Facebook and I had gotten kicked off for an hour, and I was like, "What? What did I do? What? What?" So, yeah, if it had moved my book, I don't know what I would have done. I would have had a meltdown as well.
I
But
don't want
that's
to say that
awesome.
I was expecting that for Whispers in the Woods, but my Monsters of Ashwood series it's kicked up some dirt since it's been around.
Oh, now
It's a great series though. It really is.
Now, speaking of monsters, because the Monster of the Ashwood series,
Mhm,
now I've read, like I said, I've went through a couple interviews and all that, and you started out doing paranormal romance,
mhm.
correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you said, where, yeah, okay, so you went from paranormal romance and you started with vampires, then shifters, and
Hmm.
then you went into monsters. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, so tell me the draw, because monsters seem like a total flip. You don't see a lot of that. You see the werewolves and vampire series. So what appealed to you for the whole monster kind of side of things?
For better or for worse, I have ADHD and an overactive imagination. And probably about, I want to say, a couple books in, because I started writing predominantly paranormal romance, vampires and shifters and that sort of thing. I
Mhm.
started really kind of like reading monster romance. I started seeing it a lot in the groups, people recommending certain monster romances. And I liked the idea of it. I'd never read a monster romance, so I read a couple, and I was hooked, as well as already being hooked into reverse harem. And I had this idea because, again, I'm in all these groups and I'm in all these spaces, both as a reader and an author. And I kept thinking, well, I love like a monster romance. Why choose right around Halloween? But let's feature some monsters that like nobody else has written because I like to give myself a challenge. So I knew that gargoyles are very popular, and I think
Mm.
shadows are starting to be a little bit more popular. But as far as I knew, nobody had written a hide behind, which is a type of cryptid that is really super creepy. So I decided that was it. I was going to do a gargoyle, a shadow, and a hide behind, and I just poured all my dark little heart into this book. It is definitely an homage to the darker side of my writing and media and things that I like. It does have very much an Anne Rice kind of feel to it,
Mhm.
but also you still get that high spice, that high level perfection that people love in monster romances with a ton of kinks and trigger warnings.
It sounds fantastic. Like I said, I was appealed to it, and that's why I added it into the interview as far as what we were coming for the Whispers of the Woods.
Mm.
So you might have a new fan.
I'm actually in the process. I'm actually in the process. I haven't launched it yet. We are in pre-launch, so people can go check it out. But there will be a Monsters of Ashwood Kickstarter coming very soon
Nice.
with some gorgeous artwork and beautiful special editions. So,
Well, fantastic. I'm really excited about that. Now, when you were talking just a second ago, you brought up gargoyles. Now, I'm going to skip ahead because I did have it in my questions because I found that in an interview that you did when you were talking about Disney's gargoyle. Now,
mhm.
I have, before I ask this, I have, the reason I bring it up is
Yes.
because an interview prior to you,
Hmm.
I had brought up watching gargoyles, when I was younger. And of course, the person I was talking to was considerably younger than myself and had never heard of the gargoyles. And I was like, what? What?
You're like,
And
how
then
dare you?
I know. And then I read it in your interview when you were talking about the 90s, and I was like, "Ah!" Now, mind you, I am older than you. I was almost graduating soon, but I still loved the gargoyles. I found it so deep and just
Such a
I don't
good show. Oh my gosh.
yeah, and
And I've
it's not to
rewatched
me.
it. I've rewatched it as an adult on Disney Plus, and it's still like it still hits so good.
It it is even as an older teen as I was at the time, I still was like, you know what I mean? Because like
Mhm.
I was like, this is so flippin' awesome. And even I see, even when I was older and had a job, I still freaking watched it. You know what I mean?
Good.
As I was going into my 20s, and I still loved it. And so when I actually heard someone who didn't know it, I was like, no, no, say it's not so. So when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, this is a kindred spirit right here. She's into the gargoyles.
Awesome.
I just love this. So tell me, watching that and into your books now, has that inspired you in any way, shape, or form? And what series and where can I get it?
I definitely think that watching like a lot of media growing up, whether it be Gargoyles or Buffy or Supernatural, I am very much a fangirl at heart. So a lot of my books, including Monsters of Ashwood, which, drew from things like the Addams Family and Dracula and Anne Rice, or Ava Crowley Vampire Slayer series, which draws from like Supernatural and Buffy. Like all of that stuff influences my writing, because I feel like growing up and watching those characters were very much deep characters, at least to me.
Mhm.
You could watch two guys, a girl, and a pizza place, and I know that's a really far throwback. But you could watch something like that, and there's surface value, yes, and some of the characters have more depth. But I feel like watching some of those older cartoons or those older shows in a time when we didn't necessarily have like streaming, they had to kind of like work a little bit harder, I want to say, to like
Mm,
keep things going on the air. So it was like even with Supernatural, the monster of the week for the first season, and then after that, once we bring in like angels and demons and everything kind of goes where it goes. So yeah, I do feel like a lot of that stuff definitely influences my writing. So I think that
right.
answered the question.
Right. That's great. That's great. I feel you. I get you. But you brought up Buffy. I just have to ask, what about Bewitched. No, not Bewitched. I'm sorry, wrong one. Charmed. That's it. Charmed.
Charmed. Yeah, I definitely was a fan of Charmed at the time that it was
Mm.
on, and I do say sometimes like with certain series of mine, especially like the Forevermore series, I would say definitely has like some Charmed vibes in there. And that
Oh
is the
yeah, I
parent
love.
series to Ava Crowley and the Hunter Games. They're like a 3-act series. So
I love Charmed. For me, that was the first women empowering kind of series.
love
Do you know what I
Charmed.
mean? I mean,
Mhm.
it just kick butt empowering women. I mean, I love that. And I think that speaks to even my own characters as I write. I just love that empowering of women. So,
Same.
well, awesome. I knew we had kindred spirits.
Yeah.
So, I've read a quote. Do you mind if I quote you?
Go for it.
All right. So I hear that you've said pure and utter chaos is how you would you would call your process, your writing
Yeah.
process. Can
Yeah.
you run me through that and tell me why?
Um, Mostly because I like to say that I try to have a plan, but I have ADHD and a caffeine addiction and an overactive imagination. So while I try to have a plan, a lot
I
of times
I
I
think that
tend to go
I
off
have
the
to
rails there a little bit.
let me just say one thing. I have to think I think a lot of authors are ADHD, to be honest with you. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
absolutely. I know so many that are. But I
Ye
do like to say it is pure and utter chaos just because of, just chasing those ideas and those plot bunnies. And I do try to at least map stuff out and organize stuff. But there will be so
Right.
many times where I will see somebody will say, I'm looking for this book and nobody's written it. And I go, please don't tempt me. Please don't tempt me. Please don't
Mm,
tempt me.
yeah. Because I understand that. I am very I'll get an idea, and the next thing I know, I've dumped a series and I've moved on to something else. My husband that keeps telling me, "You need to finish a series. You need to finish a series,"
Mhm.
which takes me to the fact that I just now finished a book I started in 2015.
Wow. But
Yeah.
snaps, that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. But 2015. And I've picked it up and put it down and picked it up and put it down. But I understand that. And that's why I said I think a lot of us are that way.
Yeah.
And I think it takes outside influences like Laura. I love her. She keeps me on
Yes.
track. She's like, yo, where's
Yes.
my this? Where's that? And of course my husband as well points out, like, "You need to go back to this. Why isn't this one finished? Why haven't we" you know what I mean? Because I get that way. I'll get excited, just like what you were saying. Someone will say something, I'm like, "Yeah, why isn't that written?" And the next thing I know, I'm writing storylines and chapters into something, which, you know, for
Mhm.
me, I have 7 books unfinished. That's where that's gotten me. So
Yeah.
when
I
you say
always
that to me yeah,
I
when you say
always
that to me,
have
I
a
get that.
plethora of stuff that's I call it in the hopper. It's in the hopper. It's waiting.
Yeah.
But I work
Yeah.
on several books at once. So I do think that's where
Uh
the ADHD is a blessing and a curse. So
Yeah, I get that too. I When I was in my real push, which was back in 2010, that ages me right there. When I was in my real push, and I was in my 40s then. No, no 30s. I take that back. Let's not. Well, I'm 50 now, so let's not do the math though. But anyways, I did 12 books. I published 12 books,
Mhm.
and I get it, but I I get the thrive of going from one thing to the next, but the excitement of it is really hard to not dive right into,
It
the
is.
new,
It
and I
is.
find that really hard, especially I'm editing right now that book I telling you about from 2015, I'm editing it, and I'm like and I'm rereading stuff, and of course, updating my writing as I'm going,
Mhm.
and I'm like, "Holy crap, I can't wait to find out what happens," you know what I
Oh,
mean?
I
But
love that. I always say writing
yeah.
is like binging a Netflix show because you have no idea what's gonna happen
Yes!
next.
Yes, I just wish that the other part of my brain was quicker and that the part that's enjoying it would be like, "Yeah, give me another book," and I'm like, "Crap, there's only one." So,
Same. But
yeah, it's all that work.
I've definitely felt that way about several of my books. Most Can you still hear me? Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, it just like my phone cut out there for a minute. I've definitely felt that way about several of my books where like as I'm writing them, the excitement of writing them, of not knowing what's gonna happen next, where I'm like, I
Yes.
finish up that chapter and I'm like, oh my God, now what?
Now, so that kind of runs off into another question. Are you a pure out plotter, or because you feel like you're reading it while you're writing? That's how I feel.
hmm
I don't like to finish mine. I don't like to know the ending because to me it feels as if I'm reading it while I'm writing it, and that
Most of
it
the
comes as
time,
it comes.
Most of the time I know the ending,
Mm,
and as I write, discovering, like, kind of like how everything gets there.
mhm,
Most of it, even with, like, series like Ava, like, I do know the ending, and they're still kind of the books are still coming out and they're still going, and the journey is still happening, but I've always known since the first book, like, where it ended, and I kinda feel like I'm like that with most of my books. I usually know the beginning and I usually know the end, and I have to kind of the excitement is figuring out the journey between. And I am definitely like a plot stir. I started out as a
mm.
full-on pantser, and then I needed to be a little bit more organized. So I'm trying that. And now I do like this form of like semi outlining where I don't outline completely like the entire book. Sometimes I do, it depends, but most of the time I will semi outline 5 chapters at a time. So I'll go into my Google Docs, which is where I write, and I'll set up my first 5 chapters and I'll make little notes that have prompts that tell me this is what's going to happen here, this is what you need to write. And then that gives me some space to be able to kind of go off the rails a little bit and adjust and keep things fresh and moving as I'm writing it. So I don't necessarily know what happens from chapter to chapter. I can still kind of follow those plot threads, but still give me some structure to keep things linear.
Mhm. Now, see, I will do either a tablet beside me, a laptop, and then the computer that I'm writing on. I know it's a little much, it's a little excessive, but what I do is I'll like on one device because I do everything on Microsoft Word. In fact, when you said Google Docs, that intrigues me too because
Mhm.
I've never thought to. I have used Google Docs before, but not in the same way as writing. I've always
Oh
used
my God, I
Microsoft Word.
live in Google Docs. I
Well, I
live.
use Microsoft Word, but what I do is I like to have it where all of my devices can get the same documents,
Mhm.
and which I know you can do on Google's Doc as well. But so I'll
Yeah.
have one tablet. I'll have a tablet with one like the previous chapter on it, and then
Mhm.
the laptop will have my um the character bios, each one, so I know what I've created for each characters, and that sometimes grows with each installment, each book, or each chapter.
Yeah.
And then on the main computer in the center, I have the book that I'll add to take away or do whatever. So I get that, but that is interesting how you do that. Now, do you do a storyboard by any chance?
I don't. It's sometimes I think I should be more organized and I should do things like storyboards and story bibles, but everything is up in my brain.
I do it occasionally. Like currently I have a She Shed Studios and I'm in the sound booth currently, but I also have a home office in the house. And in there I actually have a storyboard. But only on the work I was just referring to, the one I started in 2015, only because it's so far, you know what I mean, past that
Mhm.
I wanna make sure I'm closer to it, and I don't know about you, but the closer I am to work, I have to have a hands-on to it. Do you find that with yourself, like, to memorize it, you either have to write it down, type it in to have that grip? Because you said you're very organized in your brain. How do you get that? Are you just that sync that it goes and it sticks, or do you have to have a physical touch to it?
Both, because a lot of
Okay.
times it will just repeat in my brain until I go and get it down. Um,
Oh my we are
so
so kinsmen on this because I
yeah.
do that too. In the shower is the worst time that I'll get thought ideas, and it's like,
Oh,
"Crap!"
definitely. It's always right before I go to bed.
Mm,
Or
and
I
then you
know I
have to
have
get
to go
up.
to sleep, like, I'll start running what the next chapter is gonna be or what's gonna happen, and yeah,
Yes.
that's the worst for me, but a lot of times, I will either just keep it around in the back of my brain or in times where I don't have a piece of paper or something, I'll queue up my notepad on my phone, or I oftentimes have I call it an info doc, where I
Hmm.
just kind of put notes or descriptions or things like that, things that I might just need to reference at some point. And I've been known to dictate too. So even if I get like pieces of dialogue or something and I'm nowhere near my computer, like I'll dictate it and then I'll go jump into Google Docs later and pick it up and clean it up and do what I need to do.
That's really cool because I do the same thing as far as getting an idea, and then I have to get up. I have to write it down on a post-it note or something
Then
in
yeah.
order to retain it. I'm really bad about that. So for my last question of the evening for you, what's next? What's coming? What do we got coming?
Oh, so much. I'm currently working on the last Lost Souls book. I have the Monsters of Ashwood Kickstarter coming out soon, and I am working on a exclusive prequel novella that will only be available in that Kickstarter. That is part of that world, that Monsters of Ashwood world. Um, I have a bunch of signings coming up. Starting with July, I will be in Trumbull, Connecticut for Romanticon. And I will
Mm,
also be in Salem this year for Getting Witchy with It, as well as Florida for Flirty in Tampa, and somewhere in my hometown of Pittsburgh. We are putting together a convention for the Steel City, so I will be doing a local one as well. But other than
nice.
that, it's just a lot of projects. I've always got stuff going, so I have a bunch of co-writes coming this year. There is more in the Scared Shiftless series with myself and Margaret Bond Collins. Our third book, Hot Shift, just dropped today, actually. Um,
Nice.
and I do also have some co-writes scheduled with AJ Mulliken. Stella Nova and I are working on a project together, and Quality Fox and I are also working on another project together. So there will be a lot.
Fantastic. I'm awesome. That is very awesome. And, at any time, you're more than welcome to come back. I would love to dive deeper into some of those.
Absolutely. It's been a
Awesome.
blast.
Wonderful. So we've reached that time, guys, that time that you love so much. And I have to tell you guys, Amazon tells me you like it because the clicks are getting bigger. And I really can't thank you so freaking much. So, with no further ado, here is the Amazon deal of the day. I have cats. I don't know if you do. If you hate me for cats, I'm sorry, but I love my kitties. I love my dogs, but everybody has a place and a time. And the worst thing to know is to do the litter boxes. Come on, what's not my favorite job either? But with PetSafe ScoopFree Crystal Plus front entry self-cleaning cat litter box, did you hear that? Self cleaning. We never got a scoop again, guys. And I have to say, this one's a really good deal. It's 47% off. It used to be $349.99, and now it is $184.95. I'll have the link in the bio. And again, guys, thank you so much. Ariel, thank you so much for being with us. I truly enjoy it, and I would love to have you come back and we can talk further into some of the newest work you've got coming this year, right? This year, right?
Yeah, oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for listening. Until next time, bye bye for now.